The Vought International Research Facility sat 12 stories below street level, buried beneath an abandoned steel mill on Chicago's South Side. Most residents knew the mill as another corpse, from the city's industrial collapse, just rusted beams and broken windows collecting pigeon shit. They were wrong. Dr. Helena Marsh squinted at the monitor array, watching numbers cascade across 3 screens simultaneously. Energy signatures pulsed in colors that shouldn't exist. Frequencies that made her instruments scream in digital agony. She'd been tracking the anomaly for 72 hours straight, fueled by prescription amphetamines and the kind of scientific obsession that ruined marriages. Her 3rd divorce had finalized last month. The anomaly didn't care. "Readings are spiking again," she called across the lab. Frequency modulation outside predicted parameters. Dr. Yusuf Okonkwo didn't look up from his workstation. 46 years old, Nigerian immigrant, 2 PhDs, and enough clearance to know that Vaught's science division did things that would make DARPA nervous. How far outside? 1,700%. That made him look up. That's impossible. Yeah, well, tell that to the sensors. Helena tapped her screen, pulling up the waveform visualization. It looked like someone had taken reality and run it through a blender. This energy signature doesn't match anything in our database. Not solar radiation, not cosmic background, not even close to compound vibe metabolic emissions. Yusuf wheeled his chair over coffee mug in hand. Black no sugar gone cold 3 hours ago. He drank it anyway. Could be equipment malfunction. I calibrated twice. Ran diagnostics. This is real, Yusuf. We're detecting something that shouldn't exist. Above them, 16 floors up and 3 blocks north. Frenchie sat in a stolen Econoline van with equipment that would have made NSA techs weep with envy. Most of it he'd built himself from scavenged parts and contraband circuit boards. The scanner array hummed, rotating through frequencies, hunting for Vaught's digital footprints. The boys had learned the hard way that Vought didn't just own superheroes. They owned laboratories, black sites, and enough dirty secrets to fill Lake Michigan twice. The scanner hiccuped, then screamed, "Merd." Frenchie yanked his headphones off, ears ringing. The frequency spike had nearly blown his eardrums out. He toggled settings, trying to isolate the source fingers, dancing across jury-rigged controls. The readings made no sense. Energy output measuring somewhere between a solar flare and a nuclear detonation, but compressed, contained, folded into dimensions that physics said shouldn't exist. He grabbed his encrypted phone, punched in Butcher's number. It rang 4 times before connecting. "This better be good, Frenchie. I'm in the middle of something. You need to see this." The readings they are. Frenchie searched for words. "They are like nothing I have encountered. Vought is playing with something very, very bad. They're always playing with something very bad. That's their whole business model. Non, mon ami. This is different. This makes Compound V look like children's vitamins." Static crackled on the line. Then Butcher's voice, lower, serious. "Where are you?" "South Side, Old Mill District." "Don't do anything stupid. I'm 20 minutes out." The line went dead. Frenchie looked at his screens, watching the energy readings climb. Stupid was relative when the alternative was letting Vought crack open something that might swallow Chicago whole. Back in the underground facility, Helena and Yusuf had attracted a crowd. 3 other researchers, 2 security consultants, and a Vought executive who'd been sleeping in his office, roused by automated alerts. The executive, Marcus Webb, had the hollow-eyed look of someone who'd sold his soul in installments and was down to the last payment. "What am I looking at?" Webb straightened his tie, tried to project authority. It didn't quite work. Not at 4 in the morning, not with his shirt untucked and coffee stains on his collar. "Exo-energetic anomaly," Helena said. She'd given up on sleep somewhere around hour 60. "We're calling it an EEA. Energy reading suggesting extra-dimensional origin. English doctor, it's a hole in space-time. And it's getting bigger." Webb processed this information with the careful deliberation of someone whose job involved explaining the impossible to people who sign checks. Can we contain it? Yusuf shook his head. We don't even understand it. Containment would require... I didn't ask if we understand it. I asked if we can contain it. The scientist and executive locked eyes. This was the Vought way. Understand later, exploit. Now apologize never. Helena turned back to her screens. We'd need to scan it first. Map the energy signature, analyze the dimensional interface. Do it, sir, without proper safety protocols, Dr. Marsh. Webb's voice could have frozen vodka. Vought International pays you to push boundaries. Push them. Helena looked at Yusuf. He gave a small shrug, the kind that said, We're already damned. Might as well see how deep hell goes. She initialized the scanning sequence, watching as the facility's most advanced sensors oriented toward the anomaly. Energy readings were off every chart, frequencies oscillating in patterns that seemed almost intentional, almost alive. The scanner array activated with a bass hum that rattled dental fillings. Electromagnetic fields converged, focused, probing the dimensional tear with the delicacy of a drunk surgeon. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then reality screamed. The anomaly erupted, energy cascading outward in waves that instruments couldn't properly measure. Not an explosion, but an unfurling, like someone had grabbed the fabric of space and yanked it inside out. Purple light flooded the monitor's frequencies, spiking into ranges that made the equipment smoke and sparked warnings across every console. Shut it down. Webb grabbed Helena's shoulder. Shut it down now. But Helena wasn't at the controls anymore. She stood paralyzed, staring at the main screen at readings that said they'd just torn a hole between dimensions and something was coming through. 5 miles away, in an abandoned factory that used to manufacture diesel engines before the economy ate it alive, the portal manifested. Not with thunder or cosmic fanfare, but with a sound like tearing silk, barely audible over Chicago's urban drone. Reality split open, purple energy bleeding through cracks in existence, and deposited its cargo onto a floor, covered in 40 years of dust and industrial decay. Beerus woke up irritated. This wasn't unusual. Beerus spent approximately 70% of his conscious existence in a state of mild to moderate irritation. But this felt different. Wrong universe different. Wrong dimension different. Wrong everything different. He sat up slowly, taking stock. Concrete floor cold. Metal rafters overhead rusted. Broken windows letting in weak sunlight that felt distant, muted, like someone had turned down the cosmic dimmer switch. The air tasted wrong, pollution and organic decay, mixed with industrial residue. And quiet. Too quiet. Where were the attendants? Where was Whis? More importantly, where was breakfast? Beerus stood brushing dust from his clothing. The traditional garb of a destroyer god, Egyptian motifs and colors that had existed since before this universe learned to crawl. 2 meters of lean feline physiology, purple skin ears like an ancient pharaoh's cat. He looked around the factory, cataloging details with eyes that had witnessed galaxies born and dying. This is unacceptable, he said to the empty air. No response. Just Wayne through broken windows carrying scents that made his nose wrinkle. Rotting vegetation, chemical waste, something that might be what these primitive species called pizza. His stomach rumbled a sound that would have terrified anything within hearing range if anything had been close enough to hear. Beerus walked towards the light, each step measured unhurried. Haste was for mortals. He'd existed before most of reality's current civilizations, would exist long after they crumbled into cosmic dust. What was time to someone who destroyed planets before breakfast? The factory opened onto a street that looked like it had survived several wars and lost all of them. Cracked asphalt buildings with more broken windows than intact ones, rusted cars sitting on cinder blocks like industrial sculptures dedicated to entropy. A few humans scurried past on the opposite sidewalk, heads down, not looking at anything that might look back. Chicago's South Side. 8:15 in the morning. November cold, cutting through the kind of poverty that politicians gave speeches about and never fixed. The sky was gray clouds, heavy with moisture, that couldn't decide if it wanted to be rain or snow. The sun hung somewhere behind that gray ceiling, weak, distant, inadequate. Beerus felt it immediately, the wrongness of this star. Not his sun, not the cosmic furnace that powered his existence across proper dimensions. This was something else. Something smaller, younger. The energy signature felt muted, like someone had wrapped the nuclear fusion in cotton and told it to whisper. His power, usually absolute, felt constrained. Not gone, never gone, but dampened. Like trying to destroy a planet while wearing mittens. Where, Beerus said slowly, is the food service in this dimension? A rat scurried past his feet, unbothered by divinity. Beerus watched it disappear into a storm drain, then looked up at the gray sky, the insufficient sun, the city spreading around him in all its grimy, chaotic, beautifully destructible glory. His stomach rumbled again, louder this time. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. Car horns bleated. Humans shouted at each other in languages that meant nothing to him but carried the universal tone of conflict and desperation. Beerus smiled, showing teeth that had bitten through stellar matter. Well then, let's see what passes for cuisine in this charming wasteland. He started walking, following his nose towards something that smelled like cooking meat and fried carbohydrates. Behind him, the portal's residual energy flickered purple against factory walls, already fading, already forgotten. Chicago didn't notice one more strange thing happening in a city that had seen strange things since before Al Capone taught it to bleed properly. But in a van, 3 blocks north, Frenchie's equipment went absolutely insane. Sensors screaming about an energy signature that had just manifested in physical space readings that suggested something impossibly powerful had just arrived in their dimension and was currently walking toward the breakfast district. He grabbed his phone, fingers shaking. "Butcher, we have a problem, a very, very big problem." "How big?" Frenchie looked at his screens at numbers that said a walking apocalypse was currently searching for pancakes. "God-sized." The smell hit Beerus 3 blocks before he reached the source. Grease salt meat charred over open flame, carbohydrates fried in oil that had seen better decades. By divine standards, it registered somewhere between offensive and war crime. By the standards of his current hunger, it would do. The food truck sat on a corner where 2 broken streets met in mutual surrender to urban decay. Faded yellow paint rust creeping up from the wheel wells. A menu board advertising Gyro's hot dogs and something called a Maxwell Street Polish. Behind the serving window, a man in his 50s with a grease-stained apron and the kind of mustache that suggested he'd stopped caring about fashion around 1987. Beerus approached each step, deliberate. The vendor looked up from his griddle, saw 2 meters of purple-skinned feline divinity, and processed this information with the weary acceptance of someone who'd worked Chicago streets long enough to know weird didn't always mean dangerous. "What can I get you?" "Food." Beerus studied the menu board like it was written in a dead language, which technically it was. "Something filling. I've been asleep." "Yeah." The vendor flipped a burger grease spattering. "How long?" "Several eternities." Beerus pointed at random items. That, and 3 of those. "You got money?" Beerus tilted his head, genuinely confused. "Why would I need money?" The vendor's expression shifted from weary to wary. His hand drifted towards something under the counter, probably a gun, definitely inadequate. "Look, man, I don't want trouble. You want food, you pay. That's how it works." "I am a god of destruction. I don't pay for sustenance." "Yeah, and I'm the mayor of Chicago. Still gotta pay." They stared at each other. The vendor's hand still hovering near whatever weapon he'd convinced himself might help Beerus trying to remember the last time something this small had attempted to negotiate with him. It might have been a planet. The planet hadn't ended well. From an apartment window 3 floors up, someone shouted, "Hey, purple freak. We don't need your kind here." Beerus glanced up, locating the voice. Male, middle-aged, the kind of anger that came from years of watching his neighborhood decay and needing something to blame. More windows opened. More voices joined in that peculiar mob mentality where courage came in numbers and stupidity. "Get out of here. Go back where you came from," the vendor grimaced. "Just ignore them." Neighborhood's been tense since a bottle shattered against the pavement near Beerus's feet, glass, exploding cheap beer foaming across asphalt. Then another bottle, this one closer. Someone threw a brick. It missed by inches. Beerus looked at the brick, then up at the growing crowd of humans who decided that throwing things at a god of destruction was somehow wise. His irritation, already substantial, began trending toward genuine annoyance. "Sir," the vendor said quietly, "you should probably leave. I haven't eaten yet." "Yeah, but..." The third bottle didn't miss. It struck Beerus in the shoulder, bounced off without leaving a mark, shattered on the ground. The crowd cheered like they'd won something. Beerus raised one hand, palm up, and manifested a sphere of destruction energy the size of a tennis ball. Purple light crackling with potential, beautiful and terrible. He didn't throw it, didn't aim it, just held it there, letting these primitives see what their courage had earned them. The cheering stopped. "I came here," Beerus said calmly, "for breakfast. Not a demonstration. But if you insist..." The sphere pulsed energy, rippling outward. Windows cracked in their frames. Car alarms triggered up and down the block. Several humans stumbled backward, some biological instinct finally screaming warnings their bravado had ignored. Then someone flew in from the West Cape, billowing, landing hard enough to crack the pavement. The costume was red and blue stars and stripes, shield emblem across the chest. Discount Captain America by way of Compound 5 and corporate branding. He pointed at Beerus with the kind of dramatic gesture that suggested either extensive training or extensive delusion. "Citizen, I am American Star. Step away from the civilian." Beerus let the energy sphere dissipate more from curiosity than compliance. "Are you attempting to give me orders? I'm protecting this city from threats like you." American Star struck a pose that probably looked impressive in promotional materials. "Surrender now or face justice." "Justice?" Beerus tasted the word, found it wanting. "You have no idea what justice looks like at my level." American Star launched forward, fist cocked back, power from Compound 5, singing through his enhanced musculature. Fast by human standards. Glacial by Beerus's. Beerus stepped aside, not even moving quickly, just existing slightly to the left of where American Star expected him to be. The enhanced human sailed past momentum, carrying him into the food truck with a metallic crunch that bent the vehicle's frame and sent the vendor diving for cover. "My truck!" The vendor crawled out from under the serving window. "That's my livelihood, you asshole." American Star extracted himself from the dented metal costume, torn. Ego bruised worse than his body. "You'll pay for that." "I don't pay for things," Beerus reminded him. "I've already established this." Two more soups arrived, answering whatever alert system had told them a purple alien was threatening the south side. One was female, wearing green body armor and calling herself Verdant. The other was male, crackling with electrical discharge going by a megavolt. Both were B-list at best, C-list more likely. The kind of superheroes Vought deployed to neighborhoods that couldn't afford premium protection. 3-on-1. Verdant announced like this was strategy. "You're outnumbered." Beerus looked at them, really looked at them the way you might examine insects before deciding if they're worth the effort to step on. "No, I'm really not. I'm..." Megavolt struck, first lightning arcing from his hands, enough voltage to drop an elephant. It hit Beerus square in the chest. Electrical discharge crawling across purple skin, doing absolutely nothing. "Huh," Beerus observed. "Tingly." He flicked his wrist. Not a punch, not a blast, just a casual gesture like swatting a fly. The resulting Chi wave hit Megavolt with force that sent him through a parked car, through a brick wall behind the car, and into someone's living room where he landed among second-hand furniture and a TV still playing morning news. Verdant and American Star, charged together coordination born from training or desperation, or both. Verdant threw something green and glowing energy constructs that wrapped around Beerus's arms. American Star went low, trying to sweep his legs. Beerus yawned. Then he shook his arms casually, the way someone might shake off raindrops. The energy constructs shattered like cheap glass. His leg didn't move when American Star hit it. The soup bounced off physics, reminding him that mass and force only mattered when both participants played by the same rules. "This is boring," Beerus announced. He raised both hands, fingers spread, and released key blasts from each palm. Not his full power, not even close, just enough to make a point. The street exploded. Asphalt tore apart in chunks, cars flipped end over end. A fire hydrant erupted in a geyser that turned into steam from residual heat. American Star and Verdant flew backward armor-cracked costumes, shredded landing in smoking heaps 30 yards away. The food truck, already damaged, collapsed entirely, metal folding like origami. The vendor sat in the wreckage staring at what used to be his business. 23 years. 23 goddamn years I ran this corner. Beerus landed gently near him, touching down without disturbing dust. "My apologies. But they started it. You destroyed my truck. True, but technically the discount superhero destroyed your truck. I merely destroyed the street." Beerus looked around at the devastation, the smoking craters, the unconscious soups, the crowds that had been so brave with bottles now fleeing in proper terror. "Is there another food establishment nearby?" The vendor just stared at him. Sirens approached from multiple directions. More soups, probably. Beerus could sense them coming, power signatures like candles next to his son. Small, irrelevant, annoying. A news helicopter appeared overhead, camera undoubtedly recording everything. Beerus glanced up at it, wondering if he should swat it from the sky, decided against it. Let them record. Let them understand what had arrived in their dimension. "Attention, citizens of Chicago." A voice boomed from speakers, probably one of the approaching soups. "The threat is being contained. Please remain calm," and Beerus pointed one finger skyward and fired a thin beam of destruction energy. It missed the helicopter by inches, punched through 3 cloud layers, and kept going into the stratosphere. The helicopter pilot got the message, banking hard, putting distance between his aircraft and the purple being who'd just demonstrated that altitude meant nothing. His stomach rumbled again, loud enough to hear over sirens and screaming. Beerus looked down at the ruined street, the damaged buildings, the 3 unconscious superheroes who'd thought Compound 5 made them powerful. "I need," he said to no one in particular, "a proper meal before I deal with any more of this nonsense." He started walking north, following his nose toward more food smells, leaving behind wreckage that would take weeks to clean up and insurance adjusters months to process. Behind him, emergency services began arriving. Police securing the perimeter, paramedics, checking the soup's news crews, jockeying for the best angles on the destruction. In the van, Frenchie watched it all through hacked traffic cameras, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold his phone. The readings were impossible. The being that had just casually demolished a city block wasn't just powerful. He was something else entirely, something that made Compound 5 look like children's vitamins. He dialed Butcher's number. It connected on the first ring. "Please tell me you're seeing this," Frenchie whispered. "We're watching." Every news station in the city picked it up. Butcher's voice was tight, controlled the tone he used when things had gone so far past bad that normal responses didn't apply. "Where's he headed?" "North. Still tracking food sources, I think." "A god looking for breakfast? Fuck me." Butcher paused. "Stay on him. Don't engage, just track. We need to know what we're dealing with before." An explosion lit up Frenchie's monitor. 3 blocks north of Beerus's position, something had detonated. More soups arriving, probably. More idiots thinking they could stop a walking apocalypse with powers bought from a corporation. Frenchie watched Beerus change direction heading toward the explosion, with the unhurried pace of someone who knew nothing in this dimension could threaten him. The energy reading spiked, again purple light visible even through the traffic camera's poor resolution. "He's heading towards the new disturbance," Frenchie reported. "Multiple soups converging. This is going to get much worse." "It's already worse. Get somewhere safe. We'll regroup and—" The call cut out as another explosion, bigger this time, took out the cell tower servicing that sector. Frenchie's screens flickered, rerouting through backup satellites, showing him a panorama of Chicago's south side descending into chaos. And at the center of it all, walking calmly through smoke and ruin, a purple figure that shouldn't exist was still looking for breakfast. The convenience store smelled like expired milk and broken dreams. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that made the aisles look even more depressing than they were. Beerus stood in the snacks section, examining packages with the careful attention of someone trying to decode an alien language. Which, technically, he was. Vienna sausages. The can showed meat products floating in what appeared to be aspic or possibly industrial waste. The label promised nutrition. The ingredients list suggested otherwise. Beerus grabbed 3 cans, adding them to the collection of items he'd accumulated. Beef jerky, something called Slim Jims, a bag of pork rinds, and what marketing claimed was cheese-flavored popcorn. The cashier, a kid maybe 20 years old with acne and a name tag reading, Josh. Watched this purple alien shop with the detached interest of someone who'd seen worse things during night shifts in this neighborhood. When Beerus approached the counter, arms full of questionable food choices, Josh didn't even blink. "That everything? For now." Beerus set the items down, though I suspect I'll remain unsatisfied. "Yeah, our selection kinda sucks." Josh started scanning items. "That'll be $23.50. I don't have your primitive currency." Josh stopped scanning, looked up at Beerus, then at the growing crowd of police and news crews visible through the store's front windows. Sirens wailed. Helicopters circled. The entire South Side had apparently decided that watching a purple alien destroy things was more entertaining than Monday morning traffic. "You're that guy from the news. The one who trashed the food truck. The superhero started it." "Yeah, I saw." Josh went back to scanning items. "Still gotta pay, though." Beerus considered this problem with the seriousness it didn't deserve. Payment required currency. Currency required participation in economic systems. Economic systems required caring about the opinions of beings so far beneath him that calling them insects would be generous. He was saved from having to destroy the convenience store by the sound of breaking glass and screaming from outside. Through the front window, Beerus watched something descend from the sky. Not falling, not landing, but arriving, with a kind of dramatic flair that suggested either divine intervention or corporate branding. Red cape, blue suit, perfect hair that didn't move in the wind. The figure touched down on the street with enough force to crack pavement, but not enough to actually damage anything important. Calculated impact, theatrical presentation. Homelander had arrived. The crowd that had been filming the destruction with their phones now turned their cameras toward America's greatest superhero. He smiled for them, that practiced grin that sold action figures and breakfast cereal. The smile didn't reach his eyes. Nothing ever did. "Citizens of Chicago." Homelander's voice carried that resonant quality that microphones loved and real humans found unsettling. "I'm here to handle this situation. Please remain calm and let Vought International's finest protect you." Josh leaned over the counter to get a better view. Oh shit. When Homelander shows up, things either get real good or real bad. Which is more likely? Beerus asked, genuinely curious. In this neighborhood, real bad. Homelander scanned the street X-ray vision, picking through walls and cars and crowds until he located his target. Inside the convenience store, purple skin practically glowing under fluorescent lights, casually shopping while Chicago burned around about him. Their eyes met through the window. Homelander's smile widened. Beerus yawned. The god of destruction picked up his unpaid items and walked toward the exit. Josh started to say something about theft, looked at what was happening outside, and decided minimum wage wasn't worth dying over. Beerus pushed through the doorbell, chiming cheerfully, stepping into a street that had been blocked off by police cruisers and news vans. Homelander waited, cape billowing in wind that wasn't there, arms crossed in a pose that photographers had captured 1,000 times. Behind him, 3 other supes formed a tactical line. Black Noir, silent and ready, Queen Maeve, looking tired, and A-Train vibrating with that meth-like energy Compound 5 gave speedsters. So, Homelander's smile could cut glass. "You're the thing that's been causing trouble in my city." Beerus opened a can of Vienna sausages, using one claw to pierce the metal. "Your city, I wasn't aware this dimension had assigned ownership. Everything Vought protects belongs to us, and we protect everything." Homelander drifted forward, feet leaving the ground, hovering at eye level with Beerus. "I'm going to give you one chance to surrender peacefully. Come with us, answer some questions, and maybe we can work something out." "Work something out." Beerus fished out a sausage, examined it with distaste, ate it anyway. "You speak as if you have authority over me." "I have authority over everyone." The smile stayed, but something shifted in Homelander's eyes, that manic gleam that people who'd met him up close recognized as a warning sign. "I'm Homelander. I'm the strongest, fastest, most powerful being on this planet. And you're trespassing." Beerus chewed slowly, swallowed, reached for another sausage. "Strongest on this planet? How provincial." A-Train couldn't help himself. "Yo, did this purple freak just call Homelander provincial? I called your planet provincial. Your champion is merely a symptom." Beerus consumed another sausage. These were truly terrible. "Tell me, strongest being, have you ever destroyed a sun?" Homelander's smile finally cracked. "What? A sun, star, massive fusion reactor. Have you ever extinguished one?" Beerus finished the can, dropped it, metal clattering on asphalt. "I have. Several, actually. Tuesdays were usually solar systems. Wednesdays I handled galaxies. And Fridays." "Shut up." Homelander descended boots, touching ground. "I don't know what kind of bullshit story you're selling, but it's not a story." Beerus opened a second can. "It's my job description. I am a god of destruction. You are an enhanced primate playing pretend in a costume. We are not the same." Queen Maeve, who'd been in this business long enough to recognize when things were about to get catastrophically bad, took a step back. "Homelander, maybe you should shut your mouth and let me handle this." Homelander's eyes began to glow, heat vision warming up. "Nobody talks to me like that. Nobody." Beerus sighed. "You're going to attack me, aren't you? I'm going to put you down like the rabid animal you are." Disappointing, but predictable. Beerus set down his second can, still half full, and gave Homelander his complete attention for the first time. "Very well. Show me what passes for power in this dimension." Homelander moved with speed that would have impressed Olympic athletes and terrified normal humans. He closed the distance in a blur, fist cocked back, aiming for Beerus's face, with enough force to shatter concrete. The punch connected. Beerus's head turned approximately 2 degrees from the impact. His expression didn't change. He wasn't hurt, wasn't surprised, wasn't anything. He just stood there taking a blow that had knocked out kaiju-class threats and looked mildly inconvenienced. "That was your full strength?" Beerus asked. Homelander's confidence evaporated like morning dew under his own heat vision. He punched again, then again, combinations that blurred together, each strike landing with sounds like thunder. Each one doing absolutely nothing. Beerus didn't block, didn't dodge, just stood there, accepting the assault with the patience of stone. After 15 seconds of furious, useless violence, Homelander backed off, breathing hard not from exertion, but from something that might have been fear if he'd been capable of recognizing it. "What are you?" Beerus picked up his Vienna sausage can. "I told you. God of destruction. Your listening skills need work." Homelander's eyes flared red laser vision, erupting with enough heat to cut steel. The twin beams hit Beerus and the chest temperature spiking into the thousands of degrees energy that had carved through bank vaults and armored vehicles. Beerus looked down at where the lasers touched his skin, then back up at Homelander. "Is this supposed to be doing something?" The laser vision cut off. Homelander floated backward, putting distance between himself and this thing that shouldn't exist, this violation of everything he knew about power hierarchies. Behind him, A-Train had already started backing away, survival instincts overriding loyalty to Vought's brand. "Black Noir," Homelander snapped. "A-Train, engage." Black Noir moved like poetry blades appearing from nowhere, striking with precision that would have made master assassins jealous. Each knife found its target, hitting pressure points, arteries, vulnerable areas that existed on normal anatomy. Beerus wasn't normal anatomy. The blades shattered against his skin metal, fragmenting black-clad ninja stumbling back, clutching broken weapons and possibly broken fingers. A-Train blurred into motion, circling Beerus at speeds approaching Mach 1, creating a vortex of displaced air, trying to disorient or destabilize or do anything useful. Beerus watched him run, tracking the speedster's movement, with eyes that had followed beings who moved faster than light. "You're quick," Beerus observed. "For this dimension." He pointed one finger at the ground. A thin beam of violet energy emerged, touching asphalt, and suddenly A-Train wasn't running in a circle anymore. The street erupted in a ring of destruction pavement, exploding upward in chunks, catching the speedster mid-stride, sending him tumbling through the air in a tangle of limbs and compound V-enhanced confusion. Queen Maeve hadn't moved. She'd been in enough fights to know when she was outclassed. This wasn't outclassed. This was something else entirely. Something that made the hierarchy of power she understood look like children ranking themselves by height. "Maeve!" Homelander's voice cracked. "What are you waiting for?" "For you to get us all killed." She shook her head. "I'm out. This is suicide. You're not out until I say you're out." But Maeve was already leaving, walking away with the measured pace of someone who'd finally found her limit and decided survival beat loyalty. Black Noir retreated with her cradling injured hands, silent as always, but definitely agreeing with the unspoken consensus that fighting this purple being was terminal stupidity. A-Train lay in rubble, groaning, costume-shredded ego more damaged than his body. That left Homelander alone. America's greatest superhero facing something that made his power set look like party tricks. "This isn't over," Homelander declared, even though it obviously was. "I'm going to..." Beerus flicked his wrist. Not a punch, not an energy blast, just a casual gesture like brushing away a mosquito. The resulting shockwave hit Homelander with force that sent him through a parked police cruiser, through the brick wall behind it, through the building that wall had been supporting, and into the next street over, where he landed in a smoking crater surrounded by screaming civilians. Beerus picked up his Vienna sausage can, regarded it with disappointment, and resumed eating. Around him, police officers who'd been maintaining the perimeter suddenly found urgent business elsewhere. News helicopters gained altitude. The few remaining civilians ran. In the wreckage across the street, Homelander extracted himself from debris and destroyed infrastructure. His costume was torn, cape missing, that perfect hair finally showing some damage. But what bothered him more than physical injury was the expression on his face, that dawning realization that for the first time in his manufactured life, he'd encountered something genuinely stronger. He rose into the air, breathing hard blood running from a split lip that would heal in minutes. Looked at Beerus, standing calmly in the street, eating processed meat from a can, unbothered by combat that should have been legendary. "I'll be back," Homelander promised. "With reinforcements, with weapons, with everything Vought has." Bring whatever you like. Beerus consumed the last sausage. I'll still be hungry when you return. Homelander flew away. Sonic boom announcing his retreat, leaving behind destroyed city blocks and a purple alien who'd just defeated Vought's finest without breaking a sweat or finishing his snack. Josh watched from the convenience store window, phone recording everything. Dude just beat Homelander like it was nothing. It was nothing, Beerus called back, a feline hearing picking up the whisper. That's the problem with this dimension. Everything is nothing. He dropped the empty can, stretched, and considered his options. Still hungry. Still irritated. Still stuck in a universe that couldn't provide decent cuisine or decent combat. His stomach rumbled audible over the sirens and helicopter rotors. Somewhere in Chicago, there had to be food worth eating. Somewhere in this primitive dimension, there had to be something that could satisfy a god of destruction. Beerus started walking again, leaving behind the wreckage of Vought's pride and several city blocks worth of infrastructure damage. Behind him, emergency services began the grim work of cleanup and casualty counting. And in a van now positioned 8 blocks away for safety, Frenchie watched his monitors with shaking hands, updating his threat assessment for the 3rd time that hour, each update more terrifying than the last. The being that had just humiliated Homelander was still searching for breakfast. And Chicago was running out of neighborhoods to sacrifice. The Vought Tower Emergency Command Center looked like NASA during a launch failure. Screens displaying tactical feeds from 12 different angles, each one showing purple-skinned catastrophe walking through Chicago, like he owned the place. Madeline Stillwell stood at the center of this technological panic phone, pressed to her ear, listening to corporate executives scream questions she couldn't answer. "We don't know what it is," she said for the 5th time. No Compound V didn't create it. Yes, Homelander engaged. No, he didn't win. That last part hurt to say. Homelander was supposed to be invincible, the cornerstone of Vought's entire superhero enterprise. Watching him get swatted aside like a toddler having a tantrum had shaken something fundamental in the corporate hierarchy. She ended the call, turned to her tactical coordinator. "What assets do we have in Chicago?" "Stormfront is inbound ETA 4 minutes. Deep is offshore but can be repositioned. Lamplighter is available, but..." The coordinator hesitated. "Ma'am, respectfully, nothing we deploy is going to stop that thing. Then we make it look like we're trying." Stillwell straightened her suit jacket. "Deploy, everyone. I want wall-to-wall superhero coverage. Make it look like Vought is protecting Chicago, even if we're not, especially if we're not. Perception is reality. Get Stormfront on scene and make sure every camera in the city is watching." 8 miles away, Beerus had found a restaurant. Not a good restaurant, but after Vienna sausages, the bar was subterranean. A family-owned Mexican place called Rosa's, tucked between a laundromat and a liquor store smelling like grilled meat and fresh tortillas. The kind of establishment that survived on loyalty from regulars and cash transactions that didn't always make it to tax forms. Rosa herself, 63 years old and tough as the neighborhood that had tried to kill her business a dozen times, watched through the kitchen window as a purple alien sat down at table 6. Her waitress, Carmen, stood frozen by the register. "Go take his order," Rosa said. "That's the thing destroying the South Side. That's a customer. Go." Carmen approached with the trembling courage of someone who needed this job more than she feared death. "Can I, get you something to drink?" Beerus looked up from the plastic menu. "Do you have sake?" "We have beer. Modelo Tecate." "Bring me food. Multiple plates. I'm experiencing what you might call extreme hunger." He paused. "Also, your city superheroes are tedious." "Yeah, they're pretty much all assholes." Carmen pulled out her order pad, found herself relaxing slightly. If this alien wanted to kill her, he'd probably have done it already. "What kind of food? Tacos, burritos, enchiladas?" "All of it. All the kinds. All the food. Every dish you can prepare." Beerus set down the menu. "Quickly, please, before something else annoying happens." Something annoying happened 45 seconds later. Stormfront arrived like a lightning bolt, with a PR team electricity crackling around her form. Blonde hair, somehow perfect, despite the aerodynamic impossibility. She hovered above the street scanning for her target, finding him through the restaurant window, casually perusing a menu. "Attention hostile entity," her voice boomed with amplified authority. "You are in violation of federal law and VOT international protection protocols. Surrender immediately or face consequences." Inside Rose's Beerus sighed. "Does this happen often in your dimension meal interruptions by theatrical buffoons?" Carmen glanced out the window at Stormfront posturing for the news cameras. "Only since VOT started running everything. Before that, we just had regular crime. I prefer regular crime. It's quieter." Stormfront lost patience with being ignored, which took approximately 6 seconds. Lightning erupted from her hands, bolts arcing toward the restaurant with enough voltage to power a city block. The electricity hit the building's exterior, frying electrical meters, blowing transformers, but not penetrating inside, where Beerus sat calmly explaining to Carmen that he wanted extra guacamole. The god of destruction stood brushing imaginary dust from his clothes. "I'll return shortly. Please don't let my food get cold." He walked outside into a street that had been cleared by police, surrounded by barricades and news crews, and civilians filming everything on phones that would later flood social media with footage of what happened next. Stormfront descended landing with that calculated impact that looked good on camera. "You should have surrendered." Her hands crackled with energy. "Now I have to hurt you? You won't?" Beerus stopped 10 feet away. "But watching you try might be amusing." Stormfront attacked with everything Compound 5 had given her. Lightning plasma bolts, electromagnetic pulses that fried electronics in a 3-block radius. Each strike hit with enough power to reduce concrete to slag, to turn steel into liquid, to do absolutely nothing to the purple being standing calmly in her kill zone. After 30 seconds of wasted effort, she stopped breathing hard, staring at this thing that shouldn't be possible. "What are you made of?" "Annoyance, mostly." Beerus raised one hand, palm up. "And irritation. Primarily irritation today. A sphere of violet energy, manifested small enough to hold in his palm, dense enough to make the air around it shimmer with gravitational distortion." Stormfront recognized power when she saw it recognized that whatever this was, it operated on a completely different scale than Compound V. She flew backward, putting distance between herself and the sphere, but Beerus wasn't throwing it at her. He tossed it casually upward, a gentle arc, and where it landed 3 blocks north in an empty parking lot, reality simply ceased negotiating. The sphere touched asphalt and expanded not explosively, but methodically, a perfect hemisphere of erasure that consumed everything within its radius. Pavement, cars, an abandoned warehouse gone. Not destroyed, not disintegrated, just removed from existence as if someone had used cosmic whiteout. When the energy dissipated, a perfect bowl-shaped crater remained edges smooth as glass depth, measuring 40 feet. No debris, no residue, just absence. Stormfront stared at the crater at the casual demonstration of power that made her Compound V-enhanced abilities look like party tricks. That's not possible. Neither am I, apparently. Yet here we stand. Beerus started walking back toward the restaurant. "Tell your organization I want to eat in peace. The next interruption will be less polite." But VOT didn't do polite, and they definitely didn't do surrender. As Beerus reached the restaurant door, 3 more soups arrived, descending from different vectors like they'd practiced the maneuver. Maybe they had. VOT loved coordinated team tactics, made for better promotional footage. The Deep emerged from a nearby manhole. Chicago had access to Lake Michigan, which gave him options. Lamplighter dropped from the sky, trailing fire. And someone Beerus didn't recognize wearing tech armor that hummed with power. Probably expensive, definitely inadequate. "Round 2. Lamplighter announced, flames dancing between his fingers. "We've analyzed your power signature. We know how to counter it. Do you..." Beerus seemed genuinely curious. Please demonstrate. They attacked in concert, fire and water and energy beams, converging on a single point. The collision created steam pressure, a visual spectacle that would trend on social media for days. When the steam cleared, Beerus stood exactly where he'd been standing, completely unmarked, looking bored. That was your counter? He shook his head. Disappointing. The deep went first into the pavement, driven down by a casual backhand that created a man-shaped crater and knocked him unconscious before his gills could process what happened. Lamplighter tried to retreat fire-forming shields, but fire meant nothing to someone who'd bathed in stellar cores. Beerus walked through the flames, grabbed the soupy by his costume and threw him into Lake Michigan with enough force that he skipped across the water 3 times before finally sinking. The tech armor hero his name tag read Tech Knight actually lasted 4 seconds before Beerus punched through his supposedly impenetrable armor plating and ripped out the power core. The armor went dark, collapsed, and the man inside crawled out desperately, hands raised in surrender. I give up, I surrender. Smart. Beerus dropped the power core, letting it clatter on the street. Leave. Tech Knight didn't need to be told twice. He abandoned his $1 million suit and ran, joining the growing list of Vought employees who decided paychecks weren't worth dying over. Across the street in a building that had been evacuated 20 minutes ago, a woman named Jessica Chen pressed her face against the window glass phone, recording everything. 26 years old, social media influencer, 3 million followers, who were about to watch her either document history or film her own death. Guys, I don't know what this thing is, but it just took out 5 Vought soups like it was nothing. Homelander couldn't stop it. Stormfront couldn't stop it. I think we might be witnessing the end of superhero dominance. Her live stream viewer count climbed past 800,000 and kept rising. 2 blocks east, a family huddled in their basement, while tremors from the fighting shook plaster from the ceiling. The father, Marcus, clutched his daughter, while his wife called relatives in safer neighborhoods, warning them to stay away from the south side. Is it going to kill us, Daddy? Marcus had no good answer. The news said, evacuate. The police said shelter in place. Vought said they had everything under control, which everyone knew was corporate speak for, we're fucked, but admitting it would tank our stock price. I don't know, baby. But we're staying right here, okay? Above ground. Beerus finally made it back to Rosa's. Carmen met him at the door looking frazzled. Your food's ready, but the power went out from all the fighting. Some of it might be cold. I've eaten worse today. Beerus took his seat surveying the spread Carmen had assembled, despite the chaos. Tacos, enchiladas, tamales, rice beans, enough food for 6 people. He started eating with the methodical focus of someone whose appetite had been denied too long. Rosa emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. You pay for this. Does anyone pay any more? Beerus consumed 3 tacos in rapid succession. Your currency system seems theoretical at this point. Cash works fine, $68. Beerus paused a taco halfway to his mouth. I could destroy your building. You could. But you'd still owe me $68. They stared at each other, restaurant owner and god of destruction, engaged in a negotiation that transcended power dynamics. After a moment, Beerus actually smiled. I like you. You have a dignity. He went back to eating. I'll pay after I finish eating. If your dimension has anything I consider valuable enough to trade. Fair enough. Rosa headed back to the kitchen. Carmen, get this man more salsa. The hot one. Outside, Chicago burned. Not literally, though. Some buildings smoked from electrical fires. But metaphorically, the city's sense of security incinerated by the revelation that Vaught's protection was a theater, that superheroes were product placement, that something genuinely powerful could walk through their defenses like they were tissue paper. News helicopters circled at respectful distances, zooming in on the restaurant, where a purple alien sat eating Mexican food while the city's emergency services tried to contain the damage. Social media exploded with theories, memes, conspiracy posts. Within an hour, #PurpleGod was trending worldwide. In the Vought Tower Command Center, Madeline Stillwell watched disaster unfold in real time. Stock prices dropping, lawyers preparing liability defenses, executives screaming into phones at people who couldn't help them. Her assistant approached nervously. "Ma'am, the board wants a statement." "Tell them we're handling it." "Are we—" Stillwell looked at the screen showing Beerus calmly eating tacos while her best operatives lay unconscious in the street. "No, but tell them we are anyway. But tell them we—" In the van, Frenchie had stopped trying to make sense of the readings. The energy signatures coming from that restaurant defied every physics model he understood. The being inside had demonstrated power that made nuclear weapons look quaint, had casually erased matter from existence, and was now focused entirely on enchiladas. His phone buzzed. "Butcher's number." "Please tell me you have good news." "I have bad news and worse news," Frenchie replied. "Which do you want first?" "Just tell me straight." "The bad news is that this thing has destroyed 14 city blocks, defeated every soup Vought sent, and shows no sign of leaving. The worst news is that I think it's getting bored. Bored is dangerous. Bored is apocalyptic." Frenchie watched another soup arrive, firecracker this time, all patriotic costume and misplaced confidence. "And I think Chicago is about to learn what happens when gods run out of entertainment." Encore. Firecracker launched her attack. On screen, Beerus didn't even stop eating to deal with her. On screen, another Vought superhero learned that power was relative, and in this dimension, they weren't even playing the same game. Chicago was learning what it meant to be powerless. And the lesson had only just begun. The safe house was 8 miles from ground zero, far enough to avoid immediate collateral damage, close enough to respond if things got worse. Which they would. Things always got worse when Vought was involved. Billy Butcher stood at the window, watching news feeds on 3 different tablets simultaneously. CNN showed aerial footage of the South Side looking like someone had taken a sledgehammer to a sandcastle. BBC interviewed experts who had no idea what they were talking about. Fox News blamed immigrants. Standard operational chaos. Right then. Butcher set down the tablets, turned to face his team. "We've got a purple god thing tearing through Chicago Vaught's finest, getting their arses handed to them, and the entire city about to go full Mad Max thoughts." Mother's Milk sat at the table, laptop open, cross-referencing damage reports with structural engineering databases. Everything organized, everything labeled, because chaos outside meant order inside. That's how you survived. Thoughts we'd leave. MM didn't look up from his screen. "This is above our pay grade, way above. We're talking about something that made Homelander look like a bitch." "Homelander is a bitch," Huey offered from the corner where he'd been stress-eating chips for the past hour. "But yeah, this is different. This is like end of the world different." Kimiko signed rapidly, hands moving with the precision of someone who'd learned to communicate through violence before language. Frenchie translated, his accent thicker when he was stressed. "She says the being doesn't move like a soup. No hesitation, no theatrics, just absolute certainty. Like watching a natural disaster that decided to walk. Poetic." Butcher grabbed his coat black leather that had survived more fights than he cared to count. "But we're not leaving, not while Vaught's still breathing." Butcher MM started. "Think about it. Vaught's entire business model is protection, yeah? They sell the idea that soups keep people safe. But there's something out there that their best couldn't scratch. That's opportunity." Huey stopped mid-chip. "Opportunity to do what gets stepped on by something that treats Homelander like a speed bump. Opportunity to watch them fail publicly. Properly fail where the whole world sees." Butcher's grin could cut glass. "This purple bastard is doing more damage to Vaught's reputation in one day than we've managed in 5 years. I want to see how it ends." Frenchie looked up from his equipment array monitoring stations covering every surface that wasn't occupied by weapons or tactical gear. "There is something else. The energy signature, I have been analyzing it since first detection. Does not like compound V metabolic emissions. Not even close. Different how? Compound Vaiba creates power by altering biology. Yes, enhanced cells accelerated, healing augmented reflexes. But this... Frenchie pulled up waveform visualizations that looked like someone had taught chaos theory to dance. This is external energy, like the being carries its own power source. A sun maybe, but compressed, folded. The physics should not work, but there it is. Finally looked up. You're saying it's not from around here. I am saying it is not from around anywhere we understand. The frequency modulation suggests dimensional origin. Cross-universal transfer. English Frenchie. It fell through a hole in reality, and now it wants breakfast. The room went quiet. Outside sirens wailed. Helicopters circled. Chicago bled while news anchors struggled to explain the unexplainable to audiences who'd stopped believing in impossible things after the third superhero scandal. Butcher broke the silence. Right. So, interdimensional purple godcat versus corporate soups. Still think we should leave more than ever. But I know that look. You've already made up your mind. Damn right I have. Butcher started checking weapons habit more than necessity. Guns wouldn't help against something that shrugged off Homelander. We're going in. Not to fight, we're not that stupid, but to observe. Gather intel. See if this thing has weaknesses we can exploit later. Later when? Huey asked. After it destroys Chicago. After it destroys Vought's credibility. After the public sees that their heroes are bought and paid for theater that can't handle real threats. After everything Stillwell built comes crashing down. Butcher strapped a knife to his belt, more security blanket than weapon. This is what we've been waiting for. We just didn't know it yet. Kimiko signed again. Frenchie nodded. She wants to see it up close. The being. She says something about it feels honest. Honest, raised an eyebrow. It's destroying city blocks. More signing. Frenchie smiled sad and understanding. She says yes, but it is not pretending to be heroic while doing so. It does not wear a costume or make speeches. It simply is. Christ. Shut his laptop. We're really doing this. We really are. Butcher grabbed the van keys from their hook. Frenchie, bring your fancy sensors. Tactical overview and exit strategies. Huey, try not to die. Kimiko. He looked at the small woman who'd killed more people than most soldiers. Do what you do best. 20 minutes later, they were navigating South Side streets that looked like they'd hosted a small war, which technically they had. Police had established perimeters, but the perimeters kept expanding as Beerus wandered, and Vought deployed more soups who learned painful lessons about relative power. Frenchie drove one hand on the wheel, the other adjusting scanner frequencies. The equipment sang with data energy readings spiking every time Beerus did anything remotely active, which was often. He's still at the restaurant, Frenchie reported. Rosa's, Mexican place. Readings suggest he is eating. Course he is. Butcher lit a cigarette, cracked the window. End of the world can wait until after lunch. They parked 3 blocks out close enough to observe, far enough to run, if observation became participatory. The street showed signs of recent combat, scorched asphalt, a crater where Stormfront had landed badly, an abandoned Vought tactical van, with all its occupants mysteriously absent. Huey pointed at a building with one wall missing. Was that from the deep? Frenchie checked his records. Beerus threw him through it. The deep is currently in Lake Michigan, unconscious but alive. Fish are reportedly confused. They moved on foot, staying low, using abandoned cars and debris for cover. Not that it would matter if Beerus noticed them. But Butcher hadn't survived this long by assuming anything. Through his binoculars, Butcher could see into Rosa's restaurant. The purple being sat at a table eating tacos with the methodical focus of someone for whom food was serious business. Rosa herself stood nearby, arms crossed, looking unimpressed. An ordinary woman treating an interdimensional god like any other customer who might skip out on the bill. "She's got stones," Butcher muttered. "I like her." MM scanned the perimeter through thermal imaging. Vaught's got teams positioned on rooftops. Snipers, though what they think they're going to snipe is beyond me. 3 blocks north, some kind of mobile command post. Stillwell's probably in there having a breakdown. Good. Let her suffer. Butcher lowered his binoculars. "Frenchie, can you get a clean scan from here?" "Sir, already scanning." Frenchie adjusted his portable array, fine-tuning frequency ranges. The energy signature is stable now, consistent, like he has settled into baseline power, which is still... He checked readouts. Approximately 40,000 times what Homelander outputs at maximum. 40,000. Yes, and I think that is him being relaxed. A commotion erupted north of their position. More Vought soups arriving, a whole squad this time. Butcher recognized some of them from promotional materials. Shockwave Nubian Prince, someone in golden armor who probably had a ridiculous name. They descended on the restaurant like this was going to end differently than every previous attempt. It didn't. Beerus emerged from Rosa's, wiping his mouth with a napkin, looking annoyed that his meal had been interrupted again. The soups arranged themselves in formation. Team tactics, coordinated assault patterns. Professional, expensive, useless. The fight lasted 11 seconds. Shockwave opened with a sonic attack that shattered windows 3 blocks away and did nothing to Beerus, except make him tilt his head curiously. Nubian Prince threw energy spears that bounced off purple skin like rubber toys. Golden Armor Guy charged with a war cry that suggested either confidence or stupidity. Probably both. Beerus yawned. Then he flicked his fingers, 3 casual gestures, 1 for each attacker. Shockwave flew backward, embedding himself in a fire truck. Nubian Prince's energy spears reversed direction, hitting him with his own attack, knocking him unconscious. Golden Armor Guy's charge ended abruptly when Beerus sidestepped and the soup ran face first into a brick wall at full speed. The boys watched from their position, speechless. "Fuck me," Butcher whispered. "He's not even trying." Huey had his phone out recording. "This is insane. We're watching the end of superhero supremacy," Kimiko signed. Frenchie nodded agreement. "She says this is good. That fear is equalizing. Fear is also getting people killed." MM pointed at emergency responders trying to work around the combat zone. "Paramedics can't get through. Hospitals are overwhelmed. The longer this goes on..." His sentence was cut off by an alarm shrieking from Frenchie's equipment. The Frenchman's eyes went wide, staring at his screens like they'd betrayed him. "Merde. Oh, merde." "What?" Butcher grabbed the scanner, couldn't make sense of the data. "What's happening?" "The frequency modulation, it is changing. The scanner array, it is trying to compensate, but the feedback loop..." Frenchie reached for the power switch, but too late. The equipment emitted a high-pitched whine, electromagnetic pulse, radiating outward, harmonizing accidentally with Beerus's energy signature. The god of destruction stopped mid-step, turned, looked directly at their position, 3 blocks away, through buildings and cars and distance meeting Butcher's eyes, with an expression that suggested mild curiosity and infinite patience. "Bollocks." Butcher dropped the binoculars. "He made us." Beerus started walking toward them. Not rushing, not attacking. Just approaching with the unhurried certainty of something that had all the time in the universe and no reason to worry about obstacles. "Run," Huey suggested. "Should we run?" Where MM checked exits found them all inadequate. He moves faster than A-Train, and A-Train's unconscious in a crater. Running is theater. Kimiko signed, sharp and decisive. Frenchie translated reluctantly. "She says we face it. If we run, we die tired. If we stay, maybe we learn something, or we die educated." Butcher straightened his coat, checked his knife, accepted the absolute futility of his weapons. "Right then. Nobody do anything stupid. Let me talk." "You..." MM stared at him. Your idea of diplomacy is stabbing first and asking questions later, which is why I'm perfect for this. That thing out there doesn't respect weakness. It respects honesty. Butcher stepped into the open street arms, loose hands visible. No weapons drawn. No threatening posture. Just a man in a black coat standing between his team and an interdimensional god who could erase them with a thought. Beerus stopped 10 feet away, studying this strange human who didn't run or attack or beg. Just stood there meeting his gaze with a kind of defiance that suggested either courage or brain damage. "You're the one with the irritating equipment," Beerus observed. The frequency resonance was unpleasant. "Yes, sorry about that." Butcher didn't apologize often. Didn't apologize well. My associate gets excited with his toys. Toys. Beerus glanced at Frenchie's scanner array. "Primitive but functional. He's trying to measure me. Can you blame him? You're the most interesting thing to happen to Chicago since the fire." A pause. Then surprisingly, Beerus smiled. "You're not afraid." "I'm terrified. But fear and running are two different things." Butcher pulled out his cigarettes, offered one. Beerus shook his head. "You're destroying the city. The city is destroying itself. I'm merely highlighting structural weaknesses." Beerus looked past Butcher at the rest of the boys. "Your group. You hunt the false heroes." Not a question. A statement. Butcher reassessed how much this being understood about their world. "We try. They make it difficult. They're insects pretending to be lions." Beerus's tone carried contempt that made Butcher's hatred of soups look like mild annoyance. "Compound V, artificial enhancement, corporate products playing God. You disagree with the methodology." "I disagree with the delusion." Beerus started walking again past Butcher toward the restaurant. "False power creates false confidence. Your world has confused marketing with divinity." He stopped at the restaurant entrance, looked back. "Tell your equipment operator to adjust his frequency modulation. The resonance is still annoying. And tell him," a pause, "that I am not energy from this dimension. I am energy from outside your framework of understanding." His instruments can measure the symptom, but never the source. Then he was gone back inside Rosa's, presumably to finish his interrupted meal. The boys stood in the street processing what had just happened. A conversation with a god who hadn't killed them, who'd actually explained things. Frenchie was already frantically adjusting settings, muttering in French, recalibrating everything based on Beerus's casual physics lesson. Huey looked at Butcher. "Did that just happen?" "Apparently. He talked to us." "He did, and didn't kill us. Jury's still out on that one." Butcher lit his cigarette with shaking hands. "But yeah, we just had a chat with the thing that's ending Vought's world. And you know what the funny part is?" "What?" "I think he's right. About everything." Rosa's restaurant had become an unintentional neutral zone. Beerus, 8 civilians fled, Vought regrouped, and the boys watched from shifting positions as the South Side transformed into something between war zone and philosophical experiment. Kimiko hadn't left, while the others retreated to safer observation points, updating tactical assessments and debating next moves. She'd stayed. Perched on a rooftop across from the restaurant, watching the purple being consumed his third round of enchiladas, with the kind of focus she recognized. Not hunger for food alone, hunger for something that made sense in a world that didn't. Frenchie had protested through the comlink. Butcher had ordered her back. MM had listed 17 reasons this was suicide. Huey had just worried which was his default setting. She'd ignored them all, turned off the earpiece, stayed, because Beerus was honest. And in her experience, honest things were rare enough to be worth the risk. Movement below. 3 Vought soldiers in tactical gear, not soups, but corporate security, approaching the restaurant with the kind of confidence that suggested either bravery or pharmaceutical assistance. Probably both. They carried weapons that hummed with compound, V-derived energy prototype tech that made normal firearms look primitive. Kimiko watched them take positions around the restaurant entrance, coordinating through helmet comms, executing textbook breach procedures. Professional, well-trained, completely unprepared for what they were about to encounter. She moved without thinking muscle memory from years of being a weapon before she became a person. Down the fire escape across the street, landing silent behind the lead soldier. Just as he reached for the door, her hand touched his shoulder. He spun, saw her, and made the mistake of hesitating. She didn't. 3 strikes precise and economical. Disarm, disable, down. The soldier, crumpled weapon clattering to pavement. His partners reacted with training that would have impressed her if she'd cared about their competence. Energy weapons charging tactical spacing, maintained voices shouting warnings through helmet speakers. She was already moving closing distance before they could fire because energy weapons required line of sight and proper timing, and she specialized in denying both. The second soldier went down with a broken wrist and concussion. The third managed to fire energy bolts scorching the air where Kimiko had been a fraction of a second earlier. She rolled, came up inside his guard, struck his solar plexus with enough force to empty his lungs and consciousness simultaneously. 3 down in 8 seconds. She stood over the bodies, unconscious, not dead. She'd been specific about that, and became aware of being watched. Beerus stood in the restaurant doorway, taco in one hand, observing her with eyes that had witnessed civilizations rise and fall. No expression, no judgment, just assessment. Kimiko met his gaze. Didn't flinch. Didn't apologize. Just stood there, a small woman surrounded by unconscious soldiers covered in bruises from fights. These mercenaries would never know about, scarred by laboratories that had tried to make her a monster and partially succeeded. "You fight well," Beerus said finally. "For a mortal." She signed back, knowing he wouldn't understand the language, but trusting body communication transcended verbal barriers. Her hands moved with precision, forming thoughts into gestures. "They were going to hurt you." Beerus tilted his head, cat-like curiosity. "They couldn't hurt me. You know this. More signing. Intention matters more than capability. Does it?" He took a bite of his taco, considering. "In my experience, intention without power is just noise. Your species drowns in good intentions while accomplishing nothing." Kimiko walked closer, stepping over the unconscious soldiers, stopping at a distance that would have been threatening if either of them believed she could threaten a god of destruction. She signed again, slower, making sure each gesture was clear. "You're different from the others, the false heroes. You don't pretend." Beerus studied her with interest that felt different from the boredom he'd shown the soups. "You can't speak." She shook her head, pointed to her throat, signed. "They took my voice. The laboratories. Before Compound 5, before powers they experimented. Made me weapon. Took everything that made me human, except the parts that could kill. And now I choose who I kill. Small freedom, but mine." Beerus finished his taco, wiped his hands on a napkin Rosa had given him with strict instructions about cleanliness. "You're honest about what you are. That's rare." Kimiko signed. "So are you. You destroy. You don't apologize. You don't dress it up with costumes and speeches. You simply are. Destruction is my function. I am a god tasked with maintaining universal balance through selective annihilation." He looked around at the damaged street, the smoking craters, the evidence of his casual violence. "Your dimension doesn't understand this. They think power should serve, should protect, should justify itself with moral frameworks. Absurd. Power just is. Like gravity, like time." Kimiko's hands moved with conviction. "The false heroes pretend their power makes them good. You know better. I know power makes me powerful. Nothing more, nothing less." Beerus started walking, not away from her, but not toward anything specific, just movement. Kimiko followed, maintaining distance, but not departing. The beings in costumes your world worships, they're artificial, enhanced through chemistry. Given strength they didn't earn, didn't develop, didn't deserve. And they believe the strength makes them superior. It does make them superior to normal humans. Kimiko signed as she walked. That's the problem? Compound V creates hierarchy. The enhanced above the powerless, violence with corporate branding. And you have their power. I have their curse. Her hands moved sharply, angry. I didn't choose this. They made me weapons, sold me to criminals, trapped me in body that kills easier than breathes. But I choose now. Choose to protect instead of destroy. Small choice, but mine. Beerus stopped, turned to face her fully. For the first time since arriving in this dimension, something resembling respect crossed his features. You understand something the others don't. Power doesn't grant purpose. Purpose grants power meaning. Kimiko nodded, signed. What is your purpose besides destruction? Balance. I destroy so creation can continue. Too many civilizations, too many planets, too much matter accumulating in sectors that can't sustain it. I remove excess, not cruelty maintenance, like pruning a tree. Exactly like pruning a tree. If the gardener doesn't cut back growth, the tree collapses under its own weight. Universes are no different. He looked up at the gray Chicago sky, that insufficient sun. Though this dimension seems to have a different gardener, or none at all. Commotion erupted north of their position. More Vought forces arriving because Stillwell apparently hadn't learned that deploying more soups just meant more casualties. Kimiko could see them forming up another squad of B-listers whose names she didn't know and wouldn't remember. She signed quickly. They're going to attack again. They do that frequently. It's becoming tiresome. Will you kill them? Beerus considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Do you want me to? Kimiko's hands hesitated, working through thoughts that didn't translate easily to gestures. Finally. I want you to do what you choose, not what I ask, not what they demand. What you choose. Why does my choice matter to you? Because choice is the only freedom that matters. Her signing became emphatic, passionate. The laboratories took my voice, took my humanity, took my choice, made me weapon. But they couldn't take my ability to choose how I use what they made me. And you? She paused, searching for the right gestures. You have absolute power. You could destroy everything, kill everyone, end this city in seconds. But you choose to eat tacos and only fight when interrupted. That choice means something. It means I'm hungry and easily annoyed. It means you're not a monster. Monsters don't choose. They just consume. The Vought squad advanced weapons-charged team tactics executed with precision that wouldn't matter. Kimiko watched them approach, knowing what would happen. Curious to see if Beerus would prove her right or wrong about the nature of his restraint. Beerus sighed, the sound of infinite patience reaching finite limits. They're going to make me stand up. I just sat back down. The lead soup, someone in red armor calling himself Crimson Guard, launched the assault with a speech about justice and protection and other words that meant nothing. Kimiko had heard variations of this speech from dozens of corporate heroes. The words changed, but the emptiness remained constant. Beerus didn't let him finish. Just pointed one finger and released a beam of energy so precise it removed Crimson Guard's helmet without touching his head. The soup stumbled backward suddenly, very aware of his own mortality, without the technological buffer. Leave, Beerus said simply, or I remove more than headgear. Crimson Guard ran. So did his team. Professional soldiers who'd faced down drug cartels and street-level soups fleeing from a purple alien who demonstrated that their equipment was decorative. Kimiko signed. You let them go. Killing them would have interrupted my digestion. It's not mercy, it's practical. Still looks like mercy from here. Appearances deceive. But Beerus smiled slightly, acknowledging her point. Tell me, weapon who chooses, why aren't you afraid your team maintains distance? Civilians flee. Even the corporate soldiers show fear. You stand here signing philosophy at a god of destruction. Kimiko's hands moved with absolute certainty. I've been afraid my entire life. Afraid of the men who took me. Afraid of what they made me. Afraid of my own strength. Fear is familiar. But you... She gestured at him at the casual way he existed in space that bent around his presence. You're the first thing I've met that doesn't pretend. Honesty is worth the risk. Honesty is all I have. I am what I am. Destruction personified appetite, incarnate a function of universal mechanics, given awareness and hunger. He looked at her, really looked, seeing past the weapon to the person underneath. You understand this because you are also a function. Enhanced human combat asset living weapon. But unlike me, you reject your function. I accept my function. I just choose how to apply it. Semantics. Survival. They stood in the street, small woman and godlike alien, having a conversation about power and choice, and the difference between being a weapon and choosing to wield one. Around them, Chicago continued its slow collapse into managed catastrophe. Frenchie's voice crackled through the earpiece Kimiko had turned back on. Kimiko, please respond. We see you on cameras. What are you doing? She signed to Beerus. My team worries. They should. This is dangerous. Everything is dangerous. This is honest. Beerus laughed genuine amusement from a being who'd watched galaxies spiral into nothing. You would have been interesting to meet under different circumstances, perhaps as a warrior in a proper universe where power matched purpose. Perhaps you would have been different too. Less destruction, more creation. Impossible. I am destruction. It's not what I do, it's what I am. Asking me to create is like asking fire to freeze. He started walking back toward the restaurant. But I appreciate the philosophical exercise. It's been educational. Kimiko signed. Will you destroy Chicago? He paused, considering. That depends on whether Chicago continues to annoy me. Currently, it's only moderately irritating. Destructive threshold not yet reached. What would push you over? Continued interruptions during meals. Bad food. Persistent attacks by beings who should know better. He looked at her one more time. Or harm to things I've decided are worth preserving. Small things. Honest things. Then, he was gone back into Rosa's, leaving Kimiko standing in the street with 3 unconscious soldiers and the strange certainty that she'd just made something resembling a friend, or at least established mutual recognition with something that could erase her from existence with a thought, but chose not to. She signed to herself, hands moving in the empty street. Choice is everything. Her earpiece crackled. Butcher's voice tight with controlled panic. Kimiko, you mental. Get back here before... She turned it off again. Walked back to her rooftop position. Resumed watching Beerus eat while Chicago bled, and Vought scrambled, and the world slowly realized that power hierarchies were about to be violently reorganized. But now she watched with different understanding. The being in that restaurant wasn't a monster, or a god, or even really an alien. He was a function like gravity or entropy, performing his role with absolute honesty. And in a world built on lies dressed up as heroism, that honesty was the most dangerous thing of all. Because honest destruction couldn't be marketed, couldn't be controlled, couldn't be made to serve corporate interests. It simply was. And Kimiko, who'd spent her life being forced to serve purposes chosen by others, understood the terrible freedom in that. Below in the restaurant, Beerus ordered dessert. Above on the rooftop, Kimiko smiled. Not happiness, she'd forgotten what that felt like, but recognition. Sometimes the most human connections happen between people who barely qualified as human anymore. In the distance, sirens wailed. Helicopters circled. The city burned metaphorically and occasionally literally. And two beings who understood what it meant to be weapons sat in comfortable silence, choosing in their own ways not to destroy everything they could. For now, the Vought Tower boardroom had the sterile aesthetic of a place where terrible decisions were made with excellent catering. Madeline Stillwell sat at the head of the table, surrounded by executives whose combined net worth could buy small countries, but couldn't buy solutions to the purple problem destroying their business model. Options, she said flatly. Give me options that don't involve sending more soups to get humiliated on live television. The director of advanced weapons, a man named Carson, who'd spent 20 years developing things that violated the Geneva Convention, creatively cleared his throat. We have the compound V-bomb. Silence. The kind of silence that preceded either brilliance or catastrophe. Elaborate, Stillwell said. Carson pulled up schematics on the main screen. A device that looked like someone had crossbred a nuclear warhead with a chemistry set. Designed as a last resort against superhuman threats. Releases concentrated compound 5 in aerosol form combined with a destabilizing agent. Creates a field that disrupts enhanced cellular structures. In theory, it would neutralize any soup within the blast radius. In theory, the testing was limited. Lab conditions only. Never field deployment. Side effects. Catastrophic cellular breakdown in enhanced subjects. Normal humans should be unaffected, but the collateral damage to infrastructure would be significant. We're talking about a weapon that makes conventional explosives look gentle. Stillwell processed this information with the cold calculation of someone who'd risen through Vaught's hierarchy by making choices other people wouldn't. And you think this will work on our purple friend? He's demonstrating biological processes, eating, breathing, physical presence. If he has cellular structure, the bomb should affect it. Carson paused. Should being the operative word. Where is it? Secure facility, north side. We can have it deployed within the hour. Another executive, someone from legal, interjected. Madeline deploying an untested weapon of mass destruction in a major metropolitan area opens us up to liability. That liability. Stillwell's laugh could freeze blood. We have a being that's made our entire superhero roster look like children playing dress-up. Our stock is down 37%. Social media's calling for congressional investigations. We're past liability. We're in existential crisis territory. She stood, decision made. Deploy the bomb, target the south side concentration, and get Homelander back in the air. I want him visible when this goes down. Make it look like we're protecting Chicago, even though we're about to bomb it, especially because we're about to bomb it. Perception, people. Always perception. 8 miles south. The boys had regrouped in a parking garage with sight lines to Rosa's and enough concrete between them and Beerus to provide the illusion of safety. Frenchie monitored multiple feeds while coordinated evacuation routes they probably wouldn't need, but felt better having. Butcher paced, cigarette burning down to filter. Right. So, Kimiko had a philosophical chat with the cosmic cat. We learned it's honest about being a planet-destroying nightmare. Vaught's getting desperate. Anything else going tits up I should know about? Actually, yes. Frenchie turned his laptop around, showing encrypted Vought communications he'd intercepted. They're moving something. Heavy transport military escort heading toward the south side. What kind of something? The transmissions mention neutralization protocol, emergency weapons deployment, and mirrored references to compound V aerosol dispersal. Looked up from his tactical maps. They're going to gas the area. Worse, I think they have built a bomb. Frenchie's fingers flew across keyboards, pulling up technical schematics from Vaught's secure servers. A compound V-bomb, designed to destabilize enhanced cellular structures. Huey stopped stress-eating chips. They're going to bomb the South Side with people still in it. Vought does not care about people. They care about control. Frenchie highlighted the convoy route. ETA 23 minutes. Butcher crushed his cigarette under boot heel. We need to warn Beerus. Why, MM asked. He's not exactly our ally. Because if Vought sets off a weapon that might actually hurt him, he's going to retaliate. And I don't fancy being in Chicago when a god of destruction decides to stop playing nice. Kimiko signed from her position by the window. Frenchie translated. She says he won't retaliate against the city. He'll retaliate against Vought specifically. But the collateral damage will still be catastrophic. So we stop the bomb, Huey said. How hard can it be? Everyone stared at him. Right. Stupid question. Very hard. Probably suicidal. Definitely suicidal, MM confirmed. But also necessary. Because Butcher's right. That bomb goes off. Beerus stops being moderately annoyed and starts being actively destructive. Butcher grabbed his coat. Then we intercept. Frenchie plot the convoy route, MM weapons that might actually slow down military transport. Huey stay here and try not to die of anxiety. Kimiko. She was already moving toward the door, signing as she went. Frenchie smiled despite the circumstances. She says if we're doing something stupid, she wants front row seats. Course she does. The convoy moved through Chicago streets with the subtle grace of a military occupation. 3 armored trucks, 2 escort vehicles, and enough firepower to overthrow a small government. Inside the center truck, the compound V-bomb sat in a reinforced containment unit armed and ready for deployment. The convoy commander, a former Delta operator named Torres, who'd traded battlefield ethics for Vought paychecks, reviewed the deployment plan while his second-in-command drove. Detonation point is the restaurant, Rosa's, where the target has been stationary for the past 4 hours. And the civilians, evacuated officially, realistically. Torres shrugged. Acceptable losses. Vought Legal will handle it. They were 3 blocks from the target when the boys made their move. MM came from the left rocket launcher that Frenchie had acquired through channels nobody asked about firing at the lead escort vehicle. The rocket hit explosion, flipping the vehicle onto its side, blocking the convoy's advance. Butcher came from the right, driving a stolen garbage truck, directly into the rear escort. Metal screamed airbags deployed, and suddenly the convoy was boxed in. Kimiko dropped from an overpass onto the center truck's roof landing with a thud that made the driver swerve. She punched through the roof-enhanced strength, making metal feel like cardboard, and dropped inside, finding herself face-to-face with Torres and 4 guards who all had weapons pointed at her. She smiled. They should have run. What followed was 8 seconds of violence that would have made action directors weep with envy. Kimiko moved like water through the confined space, turning the truck's interior into a demonstration of what happened when enhanced reflexes met tactical training. Guns fired missing. Batons swung, hitting air. Bodies fell unconscious or concussed until only Torres remained backing against the containment unit with his sidearm drawn. Stay back. His hand shook. I'll shoot. Kimiko signed. He didn't understand, so she pointed at the bomb, then made a very clear throat-cutting gesture. Universal language, don't do this. Orders are orders. She signed again. Your choice. Your death. Torres looked at this small woman who'd just demolished his team. Looked at his gun. That wouldn't stop her. Looked at the bomb that might not even work. Made a choice. Set down his weapon. Stepped away from the containment unit. Kimiko didn't kill him. Just knocked him unconscious with a precise strike to the temple, caught him. As he fell, laid him down gently. Then she opened the containment unit. The bomb was elegant in its lethality. Compact, efficient, covered in warning labels that suggested whoever designed it knew exactly how dangerous their creation was. Kimiko had no technical training, no expertise in explosives, but she didn't need either. She just ripped out everything that looked important until the device went dark. Then she hauled it out of the truck, tossed it onto the street, and waited for her team. Butcher arrived first, smoking from minor explosions, grinning like violence was Christmas morning. "You magnificent psychopath. You actually stopped it." and Frenchie converged from opposite directions. Frenchie examined the deactivated bomb with professional appreciation. "Beautiful work. Crude but effective, though." He checked readouts. "We have a problem." "Always do. What is it?" This was Convoy 1. Vought Communications mentioned Convoy 2 as insurance. Bloody hell. We're already in position. Rooftop deployment. 6 blocks north of Rose's. Frenchie looked up at Butcher with something approaching fear. "They planned for us interfering. The first convoy was bait. The real bomb is already at the target." Butcher turned to Kimiko. "Can you get there?" She signed not fast enough. "Then we warn Beerus." "He won't care," said. "You saw him. Homelander couldn't scratch him. Why would a bomb worry him? Because it's the principle. Vought trying to kill him while he's eating. That's going to piss him off properly." High above the south side on a rooftop with sight lines to Rose's restaurant, a Vought tactical team assembled the second bomb. This version was larger optimized for aerial detonation, designed to create a cascade effect that would saturate the entire block with Compound 5 destabilizing agent. The team leader, a woman named Chen who'd spent her military career following orders, regardless of moral implications, armed the device, while her team secured the perimeter. "Detonation in 5 minutes. Clear the rooftop." Her second checked readouts. "Ma'am, there are still civilians in the blast radius." "Not our problem. Clear the rooftop." Below in Rose's restaurant, Beerus had moved on to flan. Rose's homemade flan, which was significantly better than the tacos, and marginally adequate by his cosmic standards. He was considering ordering a second serving when something shifted in the air. Energy signature. Unfamiliar. Artificial. Concentrated above him in a pattern that suggested intent rather than accident. He looked up, seeing through the ceiling, through multiple floors, through distance and matter, identifying the device on the rooftop 6 blocks away. Scanned its structure with senses that perceived reality differently than normal vision. Understood its purpose immediately. "Clever," he said to Rosa, who was wiping down the counter. "They've built a weapon specifically to target enhanced biology." Rosa glanced at the ceiling like she could see what he saw. Couldn't obviously, but she trusted her strange customer. "Will it work?" "On their soups, probably. On me." Beerus took another bite of flan. "No. But I appreciate the creativity." The device activated. Chen pressed the detonation trigger, unleashing a cascade of Compound V-altered chemistry that bloomed across the south side like toxic flowers. The agent spread riding wind currents, saturating blocks, seeking enhanced cellular structures to destabilize. It found Vought soups still in the area. They collapsed screaming as their artificially enhanced biology tore itself apart at the cellular level. Homelander, flying overhead to provide aerial optics, felt it hit him like acid in his veins. Dropped from the sky, crashed through a building, landed in rubble, experiencing pain for the first time in his manufactured life. The agent reached Beerus, touched his skin, did absolutely nothing. He finished his flan, set down the spoon, and stood. Walked outside into a street now filled with destabilizing agent purple mist that clung to everything, killing false heroes while completely ignoring the genuine God in their midst. Beerus looked up at the rooftop where the bomb had originated. Looked at the carnage spreading across blocks, at the screaming soups, at the calculated cruelty of a corporation willing to devastate its own city to eliminate a threat. His irritation, carefully managed for hours, finally reached critical threshold. "Enough," he said quietly. He raised one hand palm up and manifested something he hadn't used since arriving in this dimension. True Hakai energy. Not the weakened demonstrations, not the casual displays. The actual power of existential erasure concentrated into a sphere the size of a marble, but containing enough destructive potential to unmake matter from reality's framework. The sphere rose, floating upward with terrible purpose, tracking back to the source of the attack. Chen's team saw it coming, tried to run, but running meant nothing. When the thing chasing you moved at the speed of annihilation's intent, the Hakai sphere touched the rooftop. Reality screamed. Erasure spread in a perfect dome, removing everything within its radius. Not destroying, not disintegrating, just ceasing. The bomb vanished. The rooftop vanished. The building beneath vanished. Chen and her team vanished, removed from existence so completely that even their atoms forgot they'd been assembled into human shapes. When the effect dissipated, a perfect hemispherical void remained smooth-walled, impossible, a bite taken from reality's apple. But Beerus wasn't finished. The energy that had been concentrated now dispersed, spreading outward in waves of erasure that consumed the Compound 5 agent, saturating the air. Where the waves touched, the chemical weapon ceased to exist, removed from the timeline, undone so thoroughly that it had never been deployed. The soups who'd been dying found themselves breathing clean air. Cellular collapse, reversed by the absence of the agent that had triggered it. Homelander, buried in rubble, felt the burning stop, replaced by confused relief. Across the south side, the energy wave passed selective in its erasure, removing only what Beerus had targeted. Buildings remained. People remained. But every trace of Vought's weapon, from the chemical agent to the delivery system to the planning documents in their secure servers, simply stopped existing. The boys watched from their position. Frenchie's instruments screaming as they registered power output that shouldn't be measurable with technology built for this universe. "Jesus Christ," Huey whispered. "He just deleted it, all of it." "Not Christ," Butcher said, lighting another cigarette with shaking hands. "Something else entirely. Something that makes gods look like middle management." Kimiko signed, hands moving with something approaching awe. He chose mercy. He could have erased the whole city. Chose to erase only the weapon. That's mercy. Stared at the hemispherical void where a building used to be. He still killed an entire tactical team. More signing from Kimiko. They chose to deploy the weapon. He chose to remove the choice and them simultaneously. Honest consequence. In the Vought Tower boardroom, alarms shrieked. Every system monitoring the bomb, every sensor tracking deployment, every computer containing the weapon specifications, all of it went dark simultaneously. Stillwell stared at empty screens showing nothing, because the something they'd been showing no longer existed in any meaningful sense. What just happened? Carson checked his tablet, found only blank files where weapon schematics should be. The bomb is gone. Not destroyed, gone, like it never existed. That's impossible. Ma'am, we've been operating in impossible territory since that thing arrived. Carson pulled up the last visual feed from Chen's team, showing a purple sphere rising toward their position. The feed cut to static at the moment of impact. He didn't just stop our weapon. He erased it. Retroactively. Our most advanced development years of research gone like we never built it. Stillwell sat down slowly, processing the implications. Vought had just deployed their ultimate failsafe against superhuman threats. And it had been removed from reality like a teacher erasing a chalkboard. Recommendations. Her voice had lost its earlier confidence. Evacuation, Carson said simply. We leave Chicago, regroup, hope that thing gets bored and leaves. We don't evacuate. Vought doesn't retreat. Ma'am, with respect, Vought also doesn't typically face beings that can delete matter from existence. This is beyond our operational parameters. Rosa's restaurant survived the Hakai wave, protected by Beerus's selective targeting. He walked back inside, sat down at his table, and signaled Rosa for the check. She approached with the bill. $147, plus tip. Beerus looked at the number, at this woman who'd just witnessed reality being rewritten and still wanted payment for flan. I still don't have your currency. Then I guess you're washing dishes. I am a god of destruction. And I'm a restaurant owner who needs to pay rent. Dishes, back of the house, move. For a long moment they stared at each other. Then Beerus actually laughed genuine amusement from a being who'd existed since before this universe learned to count time. Fine, but only because I respect your priorities. He went to wash dishes, leaving Chicago to process what had just happened. Vaught's ultimate weapon erased. Their credibility shattered, their control revealed as theater. And in a Mexican restaurant on the south side, a god of destruction learned to use a commercial dishwasher while the city outside tried to remember how to breathe without corporate superheroes dictating the rhythm. Dawn broke over Chicago like an apology nobody asked for. Gray light filtered through smoke and dust, illuminating a south side that looked like it had hosted a war and lost. 14 city blocks showing varying degrees of structural damage. One perfect hemispherical void where a building used to stand. Emergency services still sorting through the aftermath, while news helicopters circled like carrion birds documenting decay. In the Vaught Tower, Madeline Stillwell stood before floor-to-ceiling windows, watching her empire crack in real time. Stock ticker on her tablet showed Vaught International down 53% and falling. Her phone buzzed with calls from board members, investors, politicians who'd been on the payroll and were now scrambling for distance. She ignored them all. Watching instead the live feeds from Chicago, the street-level footage of civilians picking through rubble, the aerial shots of that impossible crater where her ultimate weapon had been erased like chalk. Her assistant entered nervously. "Ma'am, the press is demanding a statement. Draft something about Vaught's commitment to public safety. Spin the South Side incident as an unfortunate confrontation with an unknown entity. Emphasize our heroes' bravery. The heroes who got hospitalized, especially them. Wounded defenders make better optics than invincible gods." Stillwell set down her tablet. "What's the status on the purple target?" The last confirmed sighting was Rosa's restaurant. He washed dishes, paid his bill in cash Rosa gave him from the register, and left. Current location unknown. Unknown. Stillwell laughed, brittle and sharp. "We have satellite surveillance predictive algorithms, a network of operatives across the city, and we can't track one purple alien. He doesn't register on thermal imaging. Energy signatures are inconsistent. Visual tracking works until he moves behind anything solid, then we lose him." The assistant paused. "It's like he's deliberately making himself forgettable when he's not actively destroying things." "Get me Homelander. He's in medical. The compound V destabilization did serious damage. Doctors say he needs at least 48 hours. I don't care if he needs 48 years. Get him functional and in front of cameras. We need to control the narrative before it controls us." 3 blocks from Rosa's, in an abandoned warehouse that had been forgotten by Chicago's urban renewal plans, Beerus settled into what passed for comfortable in this dimension. An old mattress someone had left behind, springs broken but adequate. He'd eaten enough to satisfy immediate hunger, fought enough to assess this world's power ceiling, erased enough to establish boundaries. Now he wanted sleep. The warehouse was quiet, peaceful in the way abandoned places often were. No soups attacking, no corporations deploying weapons, no interruptions beyond the distant sirens and helicopters that had become Chicago's new soundtrack. Beerus closed his eyes, feeling his power settle into dormant cycles. In his own universe, Whis would handle the details of his rest period. Here there was only himself and whatever passed for cosmic mechanics in this strange dimension. As sleep approached, he considered the beings he'd encountered. The false heroes with their corporate sponsors. The small woman who understood what it meant to be a weapon. The restaurant owner who had demanded payment regardless of godhood. This universe was primitive, chaotic, built on foundations of marketing and delusion. But it had moments of honesty. Small pockets of genuine existence among the theatrical nonsense. Perhaps he wouldn't destroy it entirely when he woke up. Perhaps. Sleep claimed him, and the god of destruction began dreaming of better food and more interesting fights. in a safe house across the city. The boys gathered around a table covered in laptops, tablets, and damage reports. Huey scrolled through social media, watching #Chicago God trend alongside #Vought lies and #Purple judgment. The internet had opinions, most of them wrong, all of them loud. People think he's an alien invasion, Huey reported. Or a government experiment. Or, and I quote, God's punishment for Chicago deep dish pizza. God's punishment would be more creative, Butcher muttered, studying reconnaissance photos. This is just cosmic indifference with an appetite. Organized casualty reports with methodical precision. Official count is 43 dead, 217 injured, mostly from building collapses and panic. The thing itself didn't kill many people directly. Doesn't matter what he did or didn't do directly, Frenchie said, comparing energy readings from the Hawkeye event. Vought will spin this into whatever narrative serves them. Already they blame unknown hostile entity while positioning their heroes as defenders. Kimiko signed from the corner. Frenchie nodded. She says the truth doesn't matter to Vought. Only control matters, and they just learned they cannot control everything. Yeah, and that's what worries me. Butcher lit his dozenth cigarette of the day. Cornered animals bite. Vaught's cornered now. Question is, what do they bite next? They will rebuild, Frenchie predicted. Develop new weapons, create new protocols, try to understand what they cannot understand. It is what organizations like Vought do. Control is their religion, but they can't control him. Gestured at the screens, showing that perfect hemispherical crater. He deleted their best weapon like it was spam email. What's left to try? Everything else. Butcher stood, grabbed his coat. Which means we need to be ready. That purple bastard won't be here forever. He's going to get bored, wander off, maybe go back wherever he came from. And when he does, Vaught's going to come down hard on anyone who saw them fail. Which means us. Huey looked up from his phone. So what do we do? What we always do. Document everything. Spread the truth. Make sure people know Vaught's protection is bought and paid for, theater. Butcher headed for the door. And maybe if we're smart, we figure out how to survive in a world where gods walk around and corporations think they can fight them. Across the city in a hospital room that cost more per hour than most people earned in a week. Homelander stared at the ceiling. His body was healing compound V regeneration, working overtime to repair the cellular damage. But something else had broken that medicine couldn't fix. His confidence. For the first time in his manufactured existence, he'd encountered something genuinely stronger. Not stronger through circumstance or tactics or lucky shots, just stronger. Fundamentally, absolutely impossibly stronger. The purple being had swatted him aside like an insect. Had walked through his best attacks without noticing. Had demonstrated power that made Homelander's abilities look like magic tricks at a children's party. Worse, the being hadn't seemed impressed. Hadn't even seemed interested. Just irritated at the interruption. Homelander had been raised to believe he was the peak of human achievement. The ultimate evolution. The perfect product of Vaught's scientific ambition. But now he knew the truth. He was a product, and products could be surpassed. The thought terrified him more than any enemy he'd ever faced. By noon, Chicago had begun the grim work of cleanup and aftermath. FEMA established coordination centers. Insurance adjusters wept at the damage estimates. Politicians gave speeches about resilience and recovery while privately calculating how to profit from reconstruction contracts. The purple being that had caused it all gone. Disappeared into the urban landscape like he'd never existed, leaving behind only wreckage and questions nobody could answer satisfactorily. Rosa reopened her restaurant at 2 p.m., serving lunch to emergency workers and locals who needed normal things in abnormal times. Someone asked if the purple alien was coming back. Maybe Rosa said, serving tacos like the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. He paid his bill. That's more than most customers do. In the abandoned warehouse, Beerus slept dreaming of destruction and creation. Balance and chaos, the eternal cycle of existence that continued regardless of what mortals thought about it. Chicago would heal. Vought would adapt. The boys would fight. Homelander would question. Life would continue in that messy, chaotic way organic civilization specialized in. And somewhere in the multiverse, Wes probably wondered where his god had wandered off to and whether he'd need to retrieve him from another dimension again. But that was a problem for another day. For now, Beerus slept. The city breathed. And reality remembered that sometimes the most terrifying truth was simple. Power was relative, control was illusion. And somewhere out there, things existed that made humanity's hierarchies look like children playing pretend. Chicago would never forget the day a god of destruction stopped by for lunch. And neither would Vought International, whose empire of false heroes had just learned what real divinity looked like. It looked unimpressed. 3 weeks after this god of destruction disappeared, Chicago learned to live with ghosts. The hemispherical crater on the south side became a pilgrimage site. People came to stare at the impossible geometry, the smooth walls that reflected light wronged the space where matter used to be before it stopped existing. Scientists took measurements that didn't make sense. Physicists published papers that contradicted themselves. Tourists took selfies at the edge, grinning against a backdrop of cosmic vandalism. The city cordoned it off with chain-link fencing and warning signs. Didn't stop people from climbing over at night, sitting at the crater's edge, talking to the void like it might answer back. Some claimed to feel energy there, residual power from the Hawkeye event. Others reported dreams of purple light and hunger that transcended appetite. The Vought Foundation donated $50 million toward rebuilding efforts. Public relations theater that fooled approximately nobody, but made for good photo opportunities. Madeline Stillwell stood beside the mayor at press conferences, promising safety and recovery, while Vaught's stock continued its slow hemorrhage. In the underground facility that had started everything, Dr. Helena Marsh worked 16-hour shifts analyzing data that refused to cooperate with known physics. The dimensional rift that had delivered Beerus had closed, but it left traces. Energy signatures that flickered in and out of detection. Frequencies that her instruments could measure but not explain. It's like scar tissue, she told Yusuf over coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Reality was wounded here, and wounds leave marks. Yusuf studied the waveform patterns on her screen. The energy readings are increasing, not rapidly but consistently, like something is building pressure, or something is trying to come through again. They looked at each other, sharing the unspoken terror of scientists who'd accidentally opened a door they couldn't close. Helena had sent 17 reports to Vought executives, received exactly 0 responses. The corporation was too busy managing their public relations catastrophe to worry about minor details, like potential dimensional breaches. We should evacuate the facility, Yusuf said, to where if another one of those things comes through, nowhere in Chicago is safe. Maybe nowhere on Earth. 2 floors above them, Marcus Webb sat in his office, drinking bourbon from the bottle and watching security footage on loop. The moment when Beerus had emerged from the portal, when reality had torn itself open to deliver something impossible. He'd played it 463 times, counting. His career at Vought was over. The board had made that clear without actually firing him. Corporate demotion disguised as lateral transfer exile to a research station in Alaska, where his failures wouldn't contaminate the main offices. But he couldn't stop watching the footage, couldn't stop seeing the purple being stepped through dimensions like walking through a door. What else was out there? What other things could reality vomit into their world without warning? Webb took another drink and wondered if ignorance had been better than knowledge. In a penthouse apartment that cost more per month than most families earned annually, Homelander stood at the window looking down at Chicago from enough height that people became abstract concepts rather than individuals. He'd been released from medical 3 days ago, physically healed, but psychologically fractured. Vought's PR team had spun his hospitalization as heroic sacrifice, fighting to the last against an overwhelming threat. The public bought it because the public always bought Vought's narratives. But Homelander knew the truth. He'd been irrelevant, not defeated through clever tactics or lucky circumstances, but rendered completely meaningless by something so far beyond his power level that their fight had been cosmic comedy rather than actual combat. He raised one hand, watching it shake slightly. Compound 5 had made him superior to humans. But what did superior mean when things like Beerus existed? What did strength matter in a hierarchy that extended infinitely upward into dimensions he couldn't comprehend? His phone buzzed. Stillwell demanding another public appearance, another speech about Vought's commitment to protection. He ignored it. Let her spin. Let Vought pretend their soups meant anything. Homelander had seen the truth, and truth was a poison he couldn't metabolize. Across the city in the Church of Divine Intervention, a storefront operation between a pawn shop and a check-cashing place, Reverend Marcus Chen preached to a congregation that had tripled since the Beerus incident. They told us superheroes were the pinnacle of human achievement. He called from behind a podium decorated with purple ribbons. They told us Vought protected us. They told us we were safe. And then God came to show us the lie. The congregation, mostly Southside residents who'd witnessed the destruction firsthand, nodded and murmured agreement. Some had set up shrines in their apartments, purple candles and offerings of food prayers to a deity who probably didn't care and definitely didn't answer. But faith filled the vacuum that certainty had occupied. When corporate heroes failed, people needed something else to believe in. Even if that something was a cosmic being who'd accidentally spawned a religion while looking for tacos. Chen raised his arms, voice carrying. The purple god showed us truth. Power without pretense. Strength without costume. And when humanity attacked with hubris and weapons, he removed the weapons from existence itself. This is divine judgment. This is cosmic correction. In the back row, a woman who'd lost her apartment to the fighting wept quietly, unsure if she was crying from trauma or relief or the strange comfort of believing something bigger than Vought had noticed their world. The boys operated from a new safe house, their third relocation in 3 weeks. Vought had been making moves, subtle pressure, investigating anyone who'd been near the South Side during the incident. Butcher had adapted, as he always did, routing their operations through channels that couldn't be traced. Huey scrolled through online forums, tracking conspiracy theories and cult formations. There are 17 different religious organizations claiming Beerus was their god. 23 websites selling purple god energy crystals. Someone started a dating app for people who witnessed the destruction and want to process trauma together. Capitalism meets apocalypse. Observed cross-referencing Vought's stock movements with their personnel changes. People always find ways to profit from disaster. Frenchie worked at his equipment array, still analyzing residual energy signatures from the Hawkeye crater. His instruments showed patterns that shouldn't exist, frequencies that suggested reality's fabric had been permanently altered. The dimensional barrier is thinner now, he reported. Where Beerus came through, where he used his erasure power, the walls between universes are weakened. Like, he searched for metaphor, like scar tissue that is weaker than original skin. Meaning, Butcher asked, meaning if one thing could fall through, others might follow. The door was opened. Perhaps it was not fully closed. Kimiko signed from her position by the window, watching the street for Vought surveillance. Frenchie translated. She says the energy feels angry. Like reality itself is irritated by what happened. Reality can be irritated. More signing. She says everything can be irritated when violated. Even physics has limits to what it tolerates. Butcher lit a cigarette, contemplating a future where the laws of nature themselves had been pissed off. Brilliant. We've gone from fighting corrupt soups to worrying about reality having a mood. In a laboratory 3 states away, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to the Reverend, examined samples collected from the Hakai crater site. Soil-air fragments of matter from the crater's edge, all showing unusual properties. Molecular structures that existed in quantum states they shouldn't maintain. Particles that seemed to remember being something else before they'd been rearranged. She'd been hired by a group calling themselves the Foundation for Advanced Research, a think tank funded by sources that preferred anonymity and asked questions that suggested they knew more about Beerus than they should. The energy signature is consistent with theoretical extra-dimensional breach scenarios, she wrote in her report, knowing her words would be classified immediately. The being identified as Beerus appears to have originated from a universe with different physical constants. His presence here created cascade effects that will persist indefinitely. In the recommendations section, she paused before typing, "Prepare for further incursions. The dimensional barrier has been compromised. What came through once can come through again." Her supervisor would delete that recommendation. Too alarming, too definite, too honest about threats they couldn't control. But Sarah would sleep better, knowing she'd written it, even if nobody acted on the warning. In the abandoned warehouse, where Beerus had slept, homeless communities had claimed the space. They'd found purple energy traces on the old mattress patterns in the dust that seemed to pulse with faint luminescence. Some said the space felt warmer than it should. Others reported dreams of stars being consumed of appetites that transcended hunger. A woman named Maria, who'd been homeless for 6 years after medical bankruptcy, sat on the mattress and felt something she hadn't experienced since before her world collapsed. Peace. Not happiness, not hope. Just the absence of constant fear. Something rested here, she told her companions. Something powerful that chose not to harm us, even though it could have. They built a small shrine, offerings of food and water, small tokens of gratitude to whatever divine indifference had passed through their lives without destroying them. The gesture was meaningless. Beerus was gone, wouldn't return, didn't care about their prayers. But meaning was what people made of it, and if sleeping in a god's former bed brought comfort, why question the theology? Late at night, in the Vought Tower's highest floor, Stillwell reviewed projections that all pointed downward. Stock price, public trust, government contracts, all sliding into territories that threatened the corporation's fundamental existence. But she also reviewed reports about the crater, about the energy signatures, about the dimensional breach that scientists said might not be fully sealed. And she made calls to researchers, weapons developers, anyone who might help her. Answer the question that consumed her. If one god could fall through dimensions, could Vought create conditions to bring another? Could they control what came through next? The answer was probably no. Almost certainly no. But Stillwell hadn't built her career on accepting limits. If Beerus had shown them that their soups were inadequate, then she would find something adequate. Would open doors that should stay closed, would gamble with reality itself, because control was everything, and losing it was unacceptable. In the darkness of her office, surrounded by reports and projections and the wreckage of certainty, Madeline Stillwell began planning for a future where humanity played with forces it didn't understand, because that had worked so well the first time, somewhere in the multiverse. Beerus slept dreaming of better food and adequate combat, completely unaware that his brief visit had fractured a world's understanding of power, had spawned religions and conspiracies, had left scars in reality that might never heal. He wouldn't have cared if he'd known. Gods rarely concerned themselves with the ripples their passing created. But the ripples spread regardless, cascading through Chicago, through Vought, through the careful hierarchies humanity had built to organize power and control fear. And in those ripples, new things stirred. New questions emerged. New dangers took shape. The god of destruction had left, but his echoes remained. And echoes given time and the right conditions could become voices, could become calls, could become invitations. Reality's scar tissue was thin, and something somewhere had noticed.